A doctor knocked on the door. The man who opened it destroyed her world. Years ago, the last call of the day, the late autumn air had already turned sharp as Dr. Lillian Hutt zipped up her fleece jacket and rubbed her hands together to chase away the chill. The clock on the clinic wall read 6:42 p.m. long past her scheduled shift. Her stomach growled quietly, reminding her that lunch had been a granola bar consumed between back-to-back consultations. All she wanted now was to get home, change into pajamas, and let her golden retriever climb onto her lap as they both dozed off in front of the fireplace. Then came the knock on the break room door. Dr. Hart, a nurse, peeked in. "Sorry, it's urgent." A call just came in from the pediatric line. 4-year-old boy, fever. Weak home care requested immediately. Lillian closed her eyes for a beat. "I've already clocked out Mel, I know, but..." The nurse lowered her voice. "He's in a rough part of town," and the child's mom sounds frantic. "No other docs are available right now." Lillian hesitated, then let out a long sigh. "All right, give me the file." One last house call. As the nurse handed her the intake sheet, Lillian's eyes casually scanned the lines. Child Caleb Dempsey, age 4. Symptom, persistent fever, lethargy, mild dehydration. Address, 128 Westwood Lane. Mother, April Dempsey. But when her gaze landed on the father's name, her breath caught. Father Aidan Quinn. Lillian's heart froze. She hadn't heard that name in over 7 years, not since the day he vanished. 7 years ago, she had been 25, young, passionate, madly in love with a charming artist named Aidan, who had swept her off her feet with his violin music, his late-night poems, his stormy eyes, and his wild ideas about traveling the world. They had planned a future, talked about children, slow Sundays growing old together. He had even picked out baby names. Then one morning she had woken up to find an empty apartment, a note on the pillow, and an email that said simply, "I'm sorry. I can't be who you need. Please forget me." And just like that, Aidan was gone. No explanation, no contact, no goodbye worth holding on to. Lillian had buried him in a sealed box in the back of her memory until now. The drive to Westwood Lane felt like something out of a dream or a nightmare. Lillian kept glancing at the file as if the name might change if she stared hard enough. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it wasn't the same Aidan. Maybe he had a brother, a cousin. Her mind spun with questions she wasn't ready to face. By the time she arrived at the small 2-story townhouse, the sun had dipped behind the trees. Halloween decorations fluttered in the wind. A plastic ghost hung from the porch, grinning hollowly as she climbed the steps. She rang the bell. Footsteps. A woman in her early 30s opened the door, pale, anxious, wearing a sweatshirt smeared with what looked like chicken soup. "Thank God," she breathed. "Are you Dr. Hart?" "Yes," Lillian nodded. "You must be April. Is Caleb inside?" April stepped back, ushering her in quickly. "He's in the bedroom. I think the fever's getting worse. He hasn't eaten much today." Lillian set down her bag, snapped on gloves, and followed her down a narrow hallway. Inside the small bedroom, a little boy lay curled beneath a blue blanket. His cheeks were flushed, his lips dry. "Hi, Caleb," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "I'm here to help." "Okay." He didn't answer but blinked up at her sleepily. His little fingers gripped the edge of the blanket. She gently placed a thermometer under his arm and began her assessment. Fever. 103. Slight dehydration. Mild wheezing. As she examined him, she asked April a series of questions. When the fever started, how much water he'd had, whether he'd been to daycare recently. April answered quickly, but kept glancing toward the kitchen. "I told his dad to bring some electrolyte mix. He should be back any minute." Lillian noted the nervous tone in her voice. "You said the father's name is Aidan Quinn." "Yes," April replied distractedly, then turned toward the hallway as the front door opened. "Babe, I got the..." The voice cut off as Lillian rose to her feet and turned, and in the doorway stood Aidan. Same dark, tousled hair, same green-gray eyes, same jawline that she used to trace with her fingers. He stood frozen, a paper bag in his hand, staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. "Lillian," he whispered. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The thermometer beeped softly in the background. Caleb stirred beneath the blankets. April, confused, looked from Lillian to Aidan. "Wait, you two know each other?" Neither of them answered. The room pulsed with the weight of history. 7 years of silence, a child in the bed, and a secret hanging in the air like smoke from a fire not quite extinguished. Lillian swallowed hard and turned back to the child. She still had a job to do. "The man who left me without a word is now a father." Lillian stood in that room like a statue made of glass. Caleb's quiet breathing filled the silence as her brain tried to make sense of the moment. Aidan Quinn, the man who had once been her Everything now stood across from her, holding a paper bag of medicine, like he belonged here, like he was someone's partner, someone's father. The room was too warm. Her gloves suddenly felt tight. The walls seemed to close in. Aiden finally spoke, his voice softer than she remembered. That voice used to soothe her to sleep once upon a time. Now it felt like a blade. We should let her work, April said awkwardly, sensing something charged in the air. She gently ushered Aiden out of the room, though her eyes flicked between them with growing curiosity. Lillian turned back to Caleb, whose small face was flushed with fever. She focused on her task. Swab the throat, check the lungs, monitor hydration. All the steps she could do in her sleep. And she did, relying on pure muscle memory because her mind was somewhere else entirely. When the exam ended and she stood to leave, April approached her in the hallway. Is he going to be okay? Lillian nodded. Yes. Mild viral infection. You caught it early, which is good. Keep him hydrated. The fever should break in the next 48 hours. If it doesn't bring him in. April looked visibly relieved. Thank you. You were amazing with him. Before Lillian could reply, Aiden reappeared. Could I talk to you outside for a moment? Just a minute, please. Lillian hesitated. Every instinct screamed no, but her curiosity or maybe a need for closure overrode her judgment. Fine, 1 minute. They stepped onto the small porch, the cold night air biting at their skin. I didn't know it would be you, Aiden said quickly. I never thought that our paths would cross, that I'd be called to treat your child. Lillian snapped, hugging her coat tighter. 7 years, Aiden. Not a word, not a trace. You left me. He looked away, shame flickering in his eyes. I know I don't expect forgiveness. She stared at him, fighting the urge to ask the question gnawing at her heart, but it came out anyway. Is Caleb your son? Aiden hesitated. Yes. The confirmation struck like a blow. Lillian's breath caught. With April. Yes, but it's not what you think. I met her a year after I left. It was never supposed to happen. She folded her arms. Everything just happens with you, doesn't it? Lillian, I was scared. I wasn't ready for a life that real. You wanted stability, a future. I wanted to run. That wasn't your fault. It was mine. His words only made her angrier. I needed you. I loved you and you vanished. Do you know what that did to me? Aiden's voice cracked. I do. And I regret it every day. Lillian shook her head. I have to go. As she turned to leave, he stepped forward. Please, Lillian, can we talk? Not now, but sometime. Just let me explain everything. She didn't answer. She just walked away. Back in her car, Lillian sat in silence. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She felt like she'd just stepped into an alternate timeline, one where Aiden had become a parent while she had spent the last 7 years building a career, helping families, healing children, and quietly burying the dream of having one of her own. She drove home on autopilot. Her apartment was dark quiet. She sank into the couch without even removing her coat. Her mind raced. Memories of Aiden surfaced like fragments of a dream she once lived. Late nights sharing takeout on the balcony, lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets, the way he used to kiss her forehead and promise her the moon. He had meant it. She had believed him, and now he had a son. The next few days at the clinic passed in a blur. Lillian kept her head down, buried in charts, appointments, and test results. But part of her couldn't stop wondering what kind of father was Aiden. Was he present? Was he changed? She didn't have to wonder long. 2 days later, a nurse tapped on her office door. Dr. Hart, there's a visitor for you. Says it's personal. She stepped into the hallway to find Aiden holding a paper bag and looking sheepish. I brought you that Thai curry you used to like. She folded her arms. You tracked me down at work to bring me lunch. To talk. Please, 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, she led him to the small staff lounge they sat. The silence thick. You look the same, he said. Stronger though, like someone who knows her worth. I had to learn the hard way. He nodded. I deserve that. She took a sip of water, eyes never leaving his. Why now, Aiden? Why show up in my life again? I didn't plan it. But seeing you again, it shook something loose. I realized I never really moved on. Lillian let out a bitter laugh. Well, I did. I had to. He looked down. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that Caleb, he's changed me. Being his dad is the only thing I know I've done right. She paused. Is April your partner? We co-parent. That's all we tried for a while, but it wasn't love. It never was. Lillian stared at the man who had once meant everything to her. And she wondered, Could she believe him? Did she even want to? Before she could decide, her pager buzzed. Emergency, I have to go, she said. He stood. Can I see you again? Maybe not to talk about the past. Maybe to just be present. Now. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, we'll see. As he left, she clutched the paper bag of Thai curry still warm in her hands, and for the first time in a long time she felt something shift. Not forgiveness, but possibility. A conversation we should have had years ago. Lillian didn't mean to go. She had told herself, promised herself, that seeing Aiden once more was enough. Closure, if such a thing existed, had already happened on that cold porch outside his apartment. She had said her piece. He had said his. The story was over, except it wasn't, because 4 days later, she found herself standing outside a small bookstore cafe on the corner of Hamilton and 7th, an old haunt from their time together. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, dusty wooden shelves, and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed since college. It smelled of paperbacks and cinnamon. He was already there, sitting by the window with 2 mugs and a book turned upside down in front of him. When he looked up and saw her, his smile was tentative, hopeful, but careful. You came, he said. I almost didn't, Lillian replied. But I had questions. He nodded. I figured. She sat unzipping her coat slowly. I'm not here for reconciliation or romance. I just need clarity, fair. Aiden slid one of the mugs toward her. Still drink your coffee black with cinnamon. She eyed it suspicious. You remember that? I remember everything. Lillian looked away, unsure how that made her feel. Angry, touched, or just tired. He leaned forward slightly. You want the truth, all of it. She met his gaze. Yes, no softening, no pathetic metaphors. Just tell me it. He took a long breath. Okay. I was terrified, he began. Of you, of us, of what you made me feel. Lillian raised an eyebrow. I mean it, he continued. You were everything I wasn't ready for. You had plans, you were grounded, strong. I was still chasing some idea of freedom, thinking that meant never settling down, never becoming responsible for anyone else's happiness. So you ran. I didn't know how else to cope. My dad left when I was 10. I told myself I'd never become him, but I also didn't know how not to. The night I left, I had just watched you sleep and thought, she deserves better than a man who's scared of his own shadow. That decision should have been mine to make, Lillian said quietly. I know, he whispered. I've never stopped regretting that. The silence between them stretched. Outside, leaves scraped the sidewalk carried by an October wind. Lillian stirred her coffee. So what happened after you left? I wondered. Taught music at a community center in Portland for a while. Bartended in Colorado. I didn't stay anywhere more than a year. Then I met April. He paused. She was kind, steady in a different way, but it was never love. We were friends until we weren't. Caleb wasn't planned. When she told me she was pregnant, something inside me changed. Lillian didn't speak. I wanted to be different. Aiden said, I didn't want Caleb growing up wondering why his dad was never around. I stayed. I tried. I thought maybe I could build a new version of myself. And did you? He looked down. Partly I still struggle, but when I look at him, Lillian, when he smiles, it's like the part of me that used to run finally learned how to stay. She let his words sit in the space between them, unsure whether they felt like healing or reopening. I always wanted a family, she said after a long silence. You knew that I did. I thought it would be with you. I thought so too. Back then, I didn't understand what that meant. They sat in silence again. Then Lillian asked, Does April know about us? Aiden shook his head. She knows there was someone I left behind. She doesn't know it was you. And what about now? Are you two co-parents? That's it. We've been in separate bedrooms for over a year. Lillian exhaled slowly, unsure what to feel. It wasn't jealousy, no. That chapter had passed. It was something else. A deep aching sense of what could have been, and what still might be if the past hadn't twisted their paths in opposite directions. I don't know why I'm here, she admitted. I don't know if I wanted to yell at you, or hear your side, or see for myself that you didn't just disappear into nothing. Aiden nodded. Maybe all of the above. I don't forgive you, she said, not cruelly but honestly. I'm not asking you to, but I appreciate the truth. At least now I can understand what I was healing from. He smiled just a little. You're stronger than I remember. Lillian gave him a faint smile back. I had to be. They talked for another hour, not about the past, but about other things. Caleb's favorite cartoons, the violin lessons Aiden now taught Lillian's grumpy neighbor who always yelled at her dog for stealing newspapers. It was Strangely easy, like putting on an old coat you once loved, still warm, still familiar, but now a little snug in the shoulders. Time had changed them both. As they walked out of the cafe, Lillian hesitated. "Do you want to meet him?" Aiden asked Caleb. She looked up. "Yes," she said, surprising herself, and meaning it. The boy with his father's eyes. The next Saturday, the autumn air had a gentler edge. The golden leaves clung stubbornly to their branches like they weren't quite ready to let go. Lillian stood at the gate of a modest park tucked between two apartment buildings, a place she wouldn't have noticed before, but now felt oddly familiar. Aiden waved at her from a bench beneath a maple tree. Caleb sat beside him, his legs too short to touch the ground, swinging gently as he cradled a juice box in one hand and a crayon in the other. Lillian hesitated before walking over. "You came," Aiden said, standing. She nodded. "You didn't give me a specific time. I figured you were hoping I'd show up." "I was." Caleb looked up from his drawing and blinked at Lillian with wide, curious eyes. Hi there, Caleb." She crouched down to his level. "Do you remember me?" "You gave me bubble medicine," he replied seriously. "It tasted bad." Lillian chuckled. "That means it's working." And the boy studied her for another beat, then handed her his drawing, a rainbow with a stick figure family beneath it. "I drawed this." Lillian examined it carefully. There were 3 people. One had long brown hair and a stethoscope around her neck. "That you?" she asked, pointing. Caleb nodded. "That's me. That's Daddy. And that's the doctor. That's you." She looked up at Aiden, surprised. "He's been asking about you." Aiden said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't tell him much. Just that you were an old friend and a really good doctor." Caleb interrupted. "Are you Daddy's sister?" Lillian laughed. "No, definitely not." "Then are you his girlfriend?" Lillian blinked. Aiden choked on his coffee. No, I'm just a friend." "Oh," Caleb said nonchalantly, returning to his juice box. "You can be both, you know. My friend and Daddy's." Lillian looked at Aiden and shrugged. "Smart kid. He gets it from his mother," Aiden replied dryly. They spent the next hour walking around the park. Caleb chased leaves and jumped in puddles. Aiden and Lillian walked slowly behind, occasionally sharing glances that lingered longer than they should. "Watching him is like watching my second chance play out in front of me," Aiden said quietly. "You mean being a dad?" "Yeah. Every time he laughs, I feel like the man I used to be gets a little smaller. The selfish, wandering version of me. He doesn't belong anymore." Lillian didn't say anything, but she felt the weight in his voice. Regret, growth, hope. When Caleb finally tired out, they sat back on the bench. He curled up between them, head resting against Aiden's arm. Lillian brushed a stray leaf from his hair. "You're good with him," Aiden said softly. "I've treated hundreds of kids. It's part of the job." "No, this is different. You see him." She didn't answer because he was right. She had spent so many years helping children heal physically, but this was different. Caleb wasn't just a patient. He was part of a story that was once hers. Now he was writing a chapter she hadn't expected to read. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of orange, Lillian stood. "I should go." Aiden stood too. Would you want to come by again sometime?" "No pressure. Just..." "For Caleb. He likes you." She looked at him for a long moment. I'll think about it." He nodded. "Oh, that's fair." As she walked back to her car, she glanced over her shoulder. Aiden was watching her. Caleb waved. She waved back. Her heart felt lighter and heavier all at once. That evening, long after the park had emptied and the sun had dipped behind the rooftops, Lillian found herself parked outside her apartment building, unable to move. Caleb's laugh still echoed in her ears. That high, unfiltered joy, the way he had clutched her hand when they crossed the street, the casual way he had leaned against her on the bench like he'd known her for years. She should have felt strange about it, but she didn't. It felt natural, familiar, almost too familiar. Inside, the warmth of her apartment greeted her like a soft blanket, but her mind was anything but quiet. She brewed chamomile tea she didn't drink, sat on the couch she didn't recline on, stared at a novel she couldn't follow, and when the silence became unbearable, she did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out the old wooden box from her closet, the one she hadn't opened since he left. Inside, concert tickets, a handwritten letter, photos from a trip to Vermont, his old scarf still faintly smelling of cedar and winter wind. Memories of Aiden had never been buried, just boxed away. Now with Caleb's smile etched in her thoughts, those memories stirred. The next morning, she called Aiden. "I was wondering if Caleb would like to visit the Science Museum. I have a few passes I'm not using." There was a pause. "You're inviting us out. I'm inviting Caleb." He laughed. Noted. We'd love to. The museum was bustling. Children's laughter bounced off glass walls and echo chambers. Caleb darted between exhibits with boundless energy, dragging Lillian by the hand through each section. Aiden trailed behind, holding both their coats, watching, not speaking much, but his eyes rarely left them. Inside the planetarium, as Caleb sat wide-eyed at the ceiling of stars, Lillian leaned close and whispered, "He looks like you." Aiden nodded slowly, "And he has your curiosity." She glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he asked me 3 times after we left the park if you were going to be part of our family now." Lillian blinked. "You told him no. I hope I told him." "Families come in all shapes," Aiden replied. "That sometimes people come back into our lives when they're meant to." She said nothing. After the show, Caleb fell asleep in the car seat before they even left the museum parking lot. Lillian helped buckle him in, adjusting the seatbelt with tender fingers. "Thank you," Aiden said quietly, standing behind her. "For today. For saying yes." Lillian turned slowly. "It's not that simple." "I know, but maybe it's not impossible either." They stood there inches apart, the weight of years between them. "You didn't just break my heart, Aiden," she said, voice steady. "You broke my sense of certainty. I spent years wondering if I wasn't enough." His eyes filled. "You were too much in the best way, and I was too little of a man to receive it." For the first time, she didn't flinch. Maybe that was growth, or maybe it was the start of forgiveness. "Take him home," she said gently, nodding towards the sleeping boy. "He's had a big day, so have I." They smiled faintly as she watched them drive away. Lillian realized she was no longer stuck in the past. She was standing firmly in the present, but the present was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. We weren't finished, after all. A week passed. Then too, Lillian tried to go back to her routine. Wake up, clinic rounds, lunch at her desk, evenings with her dog curled at her feet. Life as she knew it resumed its familiar rhythm, but something had changed. Not in her schedule, but in the quiet spaces between her thoughts. The in-between moments stopped at a red light, waiting for the kettle to boil, watching a toddler in the waiting room clutch his father's hand. Those were when her chest ached unexpectedly. Because now those spaces were filled with them, with Caleb's shy laughter, with Aiden's quiet eyes, with the echo of something unfinished that no longer felt like the past. But she hadn't seen them since the science museum. No text, no invitation. It surprised her how much she noticed their absence. Until a Thursday evening changed everything. It started with a phone call. She had just finished consulting a patient when her assistant Donna poked her head in. "Dr. Hart, there's a woman on the line. She says she's Caleb Dempsey's mother." She sounds shaken. Lillian's heart skipped, put her through. April's voice on the other end was trembling. "Lillian, I'm sorry to call like this, but Aiden's been in a car accident." "He's okay, I think, but Caleb was in the car too. We're at County General. They're both stable, but Caleb hit his head. He keeps asking for use." I didn't know who else to call. Lillian was already grabbing her coat. "I'm on my way." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. Lillian moved through the halls with purpose, but her heart raced wildly beneath her calm exterior. She spotted April pacing outside a room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Where is he?" Lillian asked. "Caleb's inside." Aiden's still being examined. They said it was a delivery truck. Ran a red eye. Well, late. They were just coming back from the park. Lillian didn't wait. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, Caleb sat on a narrow bed in a hospital gown, a small bandage above his eyebrow, a stuffed dinosaur clutched in his hands. He looked up and burst into tears the moment he saw her. "Doc Lillian," she rushed to him. "Hey, sweetheart, you're okay, I'm here." He threw his arms around her neck. "Daddy's hurt." Her throat tightened. "He's going to be okay, I promise." He sniffled, leaning into her shoulder. "I was scared." She held him, brushing his hair back, silently praying that she wasn't lying. 2 hours later, a nurse informed her that Aiden was out of imaging, minor concussion, a broken rib, stitches on his arm. But he'd live. Lillian let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. April approached cautiously. "They're keeping him overnight for observation. I need to go get some things from home. Would you mind staying with Caleb? I think he feels safer with you right now." It was a strange moment, this woman handing over her child to someone who had once been in love with the boy's father. But there was no jealousy, no hostility, only gratitude. "Of course," Lillian said. Later that night, as the hallway lights dimmed and machines beeped rhythmically, Lillian sat beside Caleb's hospital bed, stroking his hand as he drifted into sleep. She didn't hear the door open. "Hey," Aiden whispered, wincing as he stepped inside. She stood quickly. "What are you doing up?" They said. "I could walk, just wanted to see him." He shuffled over slowly. Lillian reached out instinctively to steady him, and for a moment their hands met. "Thank you," he said, "for being here. For him, I didn't even think twice." They looked down at Caleb, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. His small chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm. "I thought I lost everything today," Aiden said softly. "You didn't." "No," he said, his voice cracking, "but I almost did. And it made me realize something." Lillian turned to him slowly. "I keep telling myself I'm not the man you once loved, that I don't deserve a second chance. But I look at you now, and I know I never stopped loving you." Her heart jumped. She swallowed hard at Aiden. "I know I hurt you. I can't erase that. But I can show you that I've changed. I can show you every day in small ways if you'll let me." Lillian stepped back, overwhelmed. "You're injured." "Caleb's asleep." "This isn't the moment, but it is," he said, "because life doesn't give you perfect moments, it gives you real ones." She closed her eyes. The ache in her chest was no longer pain, it was longing for a version of them that had never fully died. When she opened her eyes, she looked at him, not as the man who had left, but as the father holding on, the partner reaching forward, the man trying to rewrite his ending. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." They stood in silence, then softly she said, "Maybe we weren't finished after all. What we do with second chances." The morning after the accident, Lillian awoke in a hospital recliner chair with a stiff neck and the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to her clothes. Caleb was still sleeping, one arm wrapped tightly around his dinosaur toy, the other stretched toward her, fingers barely grazing hers. She looked at his peaceful face and thought, this is what love looks like, undemanding, trusting, fragile. A soft knock on the door broke the moment. Aiden peeked in, his movements slow, one hand pressed gently to his ribcage. "Coffee?" he asked, holding out a lidded hospital cup. She took it, still breathing. "I see." "Barely, yo," she managed a tired smile. "Same." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that isn't awkward but comforting, earned. "You meant it?" he asked, not looking at her. "Last night when you said we weren't finished." Lillian sipped her coffee. "I meant, I'm willing to see where this could go. But it won't be easy. I don't forget easily." "I'm not asking you to," Aiden replied. "I'm asking you to let me show up every day." The next few weeks felt like learning to walk again after a long injury. Awkward steps, missteps, moments of panic. Lillian and Aiden started small. A late afternoon coffee together, a walk through the park with Caleb, a shared grocery run where they fought over cereal brands and ended up laughing in the frozen aisle. It was strange how natural it felt, and yet how unnatural, because this wasn't the same version of them. They had histories now. Scars that spoke, even when mouths stayed silent. The hardest part wasn't rekindling the romance. It was rebuilding the trust. There were days when Lillian pulled away without warning, when Aiden said the wrong thing and the past rushed back like a wave. But then there were moments, quiet, powerful moments, where they fell into rhythm again. One evening, Lillian came home to find a small box at her door. Inside was a note. "Not everything broken is meant to be thrown away. Some things are meant to be mended." Slowly by hand, beneath it was a porcelain mug, cracked once, now carefully sealed with golden resin in the Japanese art of kintsugi. She ran her fingers over the golden seams. Beautiful, not despite the cracks but because of them. That night she texted Aiden, "I'm willing to try, not just for Caleb, for me." The biggest shift came from the smallest voice. It was a Sunday morning, and they were all baking pancakes at Lillian's apartment. Caleb sat on the counter covered in flour, giggling as Aiden made ridiculous faces. In the midst of the chaos, Caleb looked up at Lillian with wide, serious eyes and asked, "Are you going to be my mommy now?" The room went still. Lillian froze the spatula in her hand mid-flip. Aiden looked at her, then at Caleb, unsure what to say. Lillian took a slow breath, knelt to Caleb's level and met his eyes. "I care about you so much," she said gently, "and I love spending time with you and Daddy, but being someone's mommy is very special. It takes time." "Is that okay?" Caleb thought for a moment, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, but I still want you in my fort." Lillian laughed softly. "Deal." That night when Caleb was asleep in his blanket fort, and the kitchen was clean again, Aiden took her hand. "He's already picked you." Lillian looked at him. "I'm not afraid of being part of his life. I'm afraid of losing both of you again." Aiden's voice was low. "Then we don't leave. We stay." They began to carve out something new, not a reunion, but a reimagining. They attended parenting workshops, not because they were officially co-parenting yet, but because Aiden wanted to be better and Lillian wanted to understand what that could mean. They talked about therapy, about forgiveness, about guilt, and eventually about love. "I never stopped loving you," Aiden said one night, the city glowing beyond the window. "I stopped waiting," Lillian replied, "but I never stopped wondering." He kissed her, then not like a man trying to get something back, but like one who was grateful for something returned to him freely. Then came the offer, not from Aiden, but from the University Hospital downtown. A major fellowship, pediatric cardiology, 3 years, full scholarship, prestigious, demanding. Lillian stared at the email, unread messages piling up as her heart pounded. She had applied for it a year ago, back when her life was simple, before Caleb, before Aiden, before second chances. She had forgotten about it entirely. Now it was here on the table. Aiden found her sitting in silence that evening, the screen glowing softly in the dim room. "You got in," he said, reading her expression. She nodded. He sat beside her. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know, you should." She turned sharply, just like that. "You'll let me walk away again?" "No," he said. This time I'll follow." Tears stung her eyes. "But what about Caleb?" "Oh, see, he'll come with us, April, and I will figure it out, if this is your dream." "Lillian, we don't hold you back. We go forward together." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say. Say yes to the fellowship, to us." And just like that, the future no longer looked like something to fear. It looked like movement, like growth, like love. Real weather is stronger than before. Not perfect, but possible. The city where we begin again. The city felt different this time. Lillian had lived here before, brief rotations during medical school, conferences, seminars, but this time it wasn't temporary, it wasn't a stepping stone, it was home. Or at least it was supposed to be. The fellowship at St. Clair's Pediatric Heart Center was prestigious, demanding, and everything she'd dreamed of 5 years ago. Now that she was actually here, badge clipped to her coat, scrubs neatly pressed, her name on the schedule, it felt surreal. But things were different now. She wasn't just a doctor chasing excellence. She was part of something bigger, a soulful, reforming family stitched together by second chances, daily choices, and an honest kind of love that didn't come with fireworks, but with quiet consistency. Aiden had found a temporary job teaching music at a community outreach program near their apartment. The hours were flexible, which meant he could take Caleb to preschool, handle pickup, manage groceries, and still make it to his evening classes. He had joked that he was now Mr. Dad, a title he wore with both pride and humility. Their apartment was small but bright. 2 bedrooms, mismatched furniture, and walls slowly filling with Caleb's crayon masterpieces. Lillian often came home late to the smell of grilled cheese, giggles in the hallway, and sometimes a blanket fort overtaking the living room. But adjusting wasn't seamless. The workload at the hospital was intense. Fellowships weren't designed for comfort. They were meant to shape surgeons into masters. Days began before dawn and stretched into the night. Procedures, rounds, notes, research. Every moment demanded presence and precision. And yet every time she scrubbed in, Lillian felt a pulse of purpose run through her. The hard part was balancing that with everything at home. So home, she missed dinner, missed bedtime stories, missed Caleb's first parent-teacher meeting. One night after a 16-hour shift, she came home to find Caleb asleep on the couch, a paper crown slipping from his head. Aiden looked up from the kitchen sink, drying dishes with a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "He waited up," he said. Lillian sat beside the boy, brushing his curls back. "Was there a party, king of the day at preschool?" "He made a speech about dinosaurs. You would have been proud." Her throat tightened. "I should have been there." Aiden sat down across from her. "You're saving lives, Lil, and he knows you love him. That's what counts. I want to be everything the best surgeon there is. And the best whatever I'm becoming to him, and to you, you already are. You just don't see it yet." But that was the thing. Lillian was afraid she wasn't. That she was failing at balance again. One Sunday, she didn't go to the hospital. She turned off her phone, made pancakes from scratch, and let Caleb dump chocolate chips into the batter. They built a pillow mountain and watched cartoons. And when the sun came out, they took a walk through the botanical gardens. Caleb ran ahead, squealing at butterflies. Aiden walked beside her, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "You know," he said, "I used to think stability meant being stuck. But lately, I've realized it can mean something else." "Like what?" "Like peace, like knowing where you'll be at the end of the day and who will be there waiting." She glanced at him. "You're surprisingly poetic for someone who wears socks that don't match." He grinned. "Balance, remember." That night, they put Caleb to bed together. He insisted on one story from each of them. Lillian chose a story about stars and doctors who reached them. Aiden made one up, about a knight who lost his map but found his way by following kindness. Afterward, with Caleb snoring softly, Lillian lingered at the door. He called me Mom today, she said. Aiden turned. And how did that feel? She blinked quickly, like my heart wasn't mine anymore, like it belonged to him. He stepped closer. Maybe that's how love works. It doesn't ask, it claims. She looked at him. And what about us? He touched her hand. I'm not rushing, but I'm not walking away either. And she knew in that moment neither was she. They weren't perfect. They were still healing, still learning, still navigating, but they were doing it together, and maybe that was enough. 2 weeks later, the air in the operating wing felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was the looming storm forecasted for the afternoon, or maybe it was the palpable tension Lillian couldn't quite place as she stepped into the briefing room. Dr. Myers, the attending, had a grave expression. We've got a case coming in, a 6-year-old boy with a severe congenital heart defect, emergency medevac from Oak Ridge, his oxygen saturation's dropping fast and none of the local hospitals could handle it. Lillian's pulse quickened. What's the diagnosis? Transposition of the great arteries, undiagnosed, decompensating fast. We're prepping for surgery now. I want you to assist. Of course. Lillian grabbed the case file as soon as it printed as she scanned it. Basic vitals labs, past ER visits. She froze patient's name. Michael Landon, mother. Kylie Landon. The clipboard trembled in her hands, a name from a life she thought she'd left behind. A face she hadn't seen since the day her world fell apart. The woman Aiden had once chosen, however briefly. The reason Lillian once packed a bag, left her apartment, and stopped believing in forever. The doors to the trauma bay swung open. The boy, pale and gasping, was wheeled past her. A woman followed closely, her hand trembling as it hovered over his forehead. Their eyes met Kylie. The years had aged her softly, but her expression held the same mix of fear and composure Lillian remembered. She stopped cold upon seeing Lillian in scrubs mask pulled under her chin. Lillian didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the boy. Micah, then back to Kylie. I'm on the team, she said flatly. Kylie's voice faltered. I didn't know you were here. Neither woman moved, but around them nurses rushed, alarms beeped. Lives moved forward. Dr. Myers returned Lillian's scrub in OR 3. Lillian turned and walked without another word. In the scrub room, her hands shook as she lathered the antiseptic. Her mind was a storm of memory, emotion, resentment. But there was also training, duty, and a boy's life on the line. As the surgery began, Dr. Myers handed off the delicate bypass work to her. You're up, heart. Lillian leaned in, scalpel suction clamp. Her heartbeat slowed to match the rhythm of the monitors. This was where she disappeared, where everything fell away. But the task in front of her, Micah's chest was open. His tiny heart lay exposed, blue-tinged, and fighting for every beat. This wasn't about Kylie. This wasn't about Aiden. This was about a child who needed her. Hours passed. The OR buzzed with tension and skill. Slowly, carefully, Lillian guided the team through the repair. It was brutal, beautiful, sacred. When they closed him up and the new rhythm held strong, Lillian stepped back, her gown soaked in sweat, her eyes blurry. She had done it, and she had done it for a woman she once hated, for a child she'd never known, because that was who she was, because she was never going to let the past define the kind of doctor or person she became. The sterile white walls of the recovery room couldn't hide the weight in the air. Lillian stood at the foot of the bed, her hands still trembling slightly as she checked the monitor one last time. Micah was stable now. The bleeding controlled, his heart beating strongly in the quiet aftermath of the surgery. She turned to leave, but was stopped by a voice from behind her. Lillian. Kylie stood in the doorway, her face pale but hopeful. Can I talk to you? Lillian hesitated. The room was small, the memories of the past heavy. The last time she'd seen Kylie, they'd exchanged nothing but anger and pain. Words unsaid, feelings too complex to resolve. But now, with the sterile smell of antiseptic in the air and a child's life saved between them, there was an undeniable shift. Lillian nodded and stepped back into the room. I never expected to see you again, Kylie said, her voice thick with emotion. Not like this. Lillian didn't reply at first. Her mind raced through the years, Aiden's confusion, her heartbreak, the lies, the betrayal. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was that Micah was alive. She looked at Kylie and spoke with forced calm. You're welcome, Lillian said quietly, but this isn't about us, it's about him. Kylie nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know, and I'll forever be grateful. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I owe you an apology, Lillian, for everything. I've never had the chance to say it, but I'm sorry. Lillian's chest tightened. The apology was long overdue, but hearing it now felt like a salve to old wounds, even if the scar remained. She didn't speak at first, but finally nodded. I never wanted to hurt you, Kylie continued, her voice shaking. I didn't want any of this to happen, but when I found out I was pregnant, I was scared, and I made terrible choices. I was so angry with myself. I hurt everyone I loved, including you. Lillian took a step closer, her voice low but steady. You made a choice, Kylie. And I'm not sure you ever understood what that meant for Aiden and me, but I get it now. I do. Kylie looked at her, the shame in her eyes palpable. I never wanted to take him away from you. I didn't know how to fix myself. I didn't know what to do. Lillian exhaled the words she had been holding for years, finally slipping out. You didn't take him away. He wasn't mine to lose, but I lost myself in that fight, and I needed to let go of that. For both of us. The silence between them lingered. Then Kylie spoke again, softer this time. I'm not asking for anything, Lillian. I know we can't go back, but if you ever want to know the truth about why I did what I did, I'll be here. Lillian looked at her, and for the first time she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The past wasn't as heavy anymore. You've got to go. He'll wake up soon, Lillian said, motioning to Micah. You should be there when he does. Kylie gave a small appreciative nod and turned to leave the room. As Lillian watched her walk away, she couldn't help but wonder about forgiveness. It wasn't as clean and neat as she'd expected. It wasn't something that could be wrapped up in a nice, pretty bow, but it was real. And it was starting to feel possible. When Lillian stepped outside the recovery room, she saw Aiden standing in the hallway, his face etched with concern. He smiled when he saw her, but there was something else in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. I was just talking to the nurses. How is he? Aiden asked. Stable, Lillian replied, taking a deep breath. He's going to be okay. Aiden stepped closer, his voice soft. What happened in there, Lil? With Kylie. Lillian's eyes flicked to the floor. She hadn't planned on telling him. She wasn't sure she was ready, but the truth was out now, and for once it felt like the right time. I told her I forgave her, Lillian said quietly. I told her I understood why she did what she did, and I told her I was sorry for holding on to the past for so long. Aiden's eyes softened. Lil. He hesitated, unsure of what to say next. Lillian shook her head, her voice steady. I'm not asking for an apology from you, Aiden. Not anymore. We're both carrying different things now. And we're moving forward. He looked at her for a long moment as if searching her face for something he couldn't find. Then he stepped forward gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm so proud of you, he said softly. You've come so far. Lillian smiled a bittersweet smile. We've come far, and for the first time in years she believed it. Lillian's heart raced as she stepped out of the operating room, a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Settling in her bones, Micah's surgery had been a success. His heart was now stable. The blood flow properly rerouted, and the future looked promising. But for Lillian, the victory was bittersweet. She had saved a child she'd never met, but the echoes of the past clung to her like a shadow. She found herself standing outside the recovery room, trying to steady her breath. The weight of the day seemed to fall heavily on her. Each step she took felt heavier than the last. She had confronted the past, forgiven, and even let go, but something was still missing, or rather, someone. As she leaned against the wall, her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen lit up with Aiden's name. I'm outside. Can we talk? The simplicity of his message struck her, but she didn't hesitate to respond. I'll be right there. When she found him, Aiden was leaning against a column, staring at the floor. His eyes lifted when he saw her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. But there was something else there too, something that Lillian couldn't read. You okay? He asked, his voice low. I'm fine, She paused, taking a deep breath. Tired, you know how it is. He nodded, but didn't move. Yeah, I do. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood there in the quiet hallway, the sounds of the hospital far away but still present in the background. Aiden looked at Lillian, his gaze intense but soft. What's going on? Aiden? Lillian asked, breaking the silence. Why do you look like that? I've been thinking, he said slowly, about us, about you. Lillian frowned. Aiden. No, just let me finish, he interrupted, stepping closer. I've been thinking about everything we've been through. The time apart, the hurt, and now Micah. And I realized something. What? Lillian asked softly. I never told you why I stayed with you, why I fought for you, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Lillian's heart stilled. The memories came flooding back, the anger, the betrayal, the love she thought had been lost forever. I stayed because he hesitated, looking down at his hands, because I never wanted to give up on us. You are my first love, Lillian. And even when things fell apart, I couldn't stop thinking about the life we could have had together. But it wasn't just about me. It was about Caleb too. It was about being the person you needed me to be. Lillian swallowed. I didn't need you to fight for me. I needed you to choose me. I know, Aiden said, his voice breaking. And I'm sorry I failed you, but I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild what we had. Tears welled in Lillian's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. And what about Kylie? About what happened all those years ago? Can we just pretend that never happened? Aiden stepped closer, gently cupping her face. No, we can't pretend. But we can face it. Together, Lillian closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle over her. The future was uncertain, but in that moment she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. Do you really think we can make this work? She whispered. Aiden smiled, a sad but hopeful smile. I don't know, Lil, but I'm willing to try. With you for us, Lillian took a deep breath. I'm willing to try too. And just like that, they took the first step forward together. The following days were filled with small victories. Caleb's laughter, Aiden's quiet support, and the tentative steps Lillian was taking toward healing. She still had moments of doubt, moments when the weight of her past would crash down on her. But with Aiden by her side and Caleb's unwavering trust, she felt the hope of a new beginning. But it wasn't just the past they had to face together. Lillian knew that the real challenge would come when they confronted their future. And that future filled with both promise and uncertainty was something they would navigate step by step. The home we never thought we'd have. The morning after their conversation in the hospital hallway, Lillian woke up to the sounds of Caleb's laughter drifting down the hall. It was the kind of sound that brought a warmth she couldn't fully explain, like a quiet reminder that this new beginning wasn't a dream. It was real. It was happening. She got out of bed, trying not to wake Aiden, who was still sleeping soundly beside her. The soft glow of dawn spilled over the bed, casting long shadows on the walls. She stood there for a moment, taking it all in. How much had changed and how much was still uncertain. Lillian smiled to herself and walked down the hall to Caleb's room. He was standing at the window, his small hands pressed against the glass, watching the birds in the backyard. Good morning, buddy, she said softly. Mom? Look, Caleb exclaimed, pointing at the birds. They're flying away. I want to fly too. Lillian crouched down beside him. Maybe one day you'll fly. Who knows? But for now, you've got your feet on the ground. That's pretty special too. Caleb looked at her, his big brown eyes sparkling. I want to be like you, Mom. You're the best doctor in the whole world. Lillian chuckled, her heart swelling at the sight of her son's unfiltered admiration. You know, I'm not perfect, sweetie, but I'm trying. Just like you are, Aiden's voice came from behind her. You're perfect to me. Lillian turned around to see him standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas, a half smile on his face. I'm not perfect, she repeated. But this time she said it with a softer tone. She knew he didn't want to hear it. But she needed to say it for herself. Aiden stepped into the room, walking over to Caleb and lifting him into his arms. We're all trying, Lil. And that's what matters. It's not about perfection. He kissed Caleb's forehead and looked at Lillian. And I'm proud of you, of how far you've come. Lillian felt a rush of emotions she hadn't let herself feel before: gratefulness, hope. The weight of all the choices ahead felt lighter with Aiden by her side. We'll figure it out, Aiden, she said, her voice full of conviction. We'll figure it all out together. They spent the next few weeks settling into their new routines. Lillian continued her fellowship with even more dedication now that the cloud of doubt had lifted. Aiden's work schedule was demanding as well, but the balance they were creating, this quiet, simple life, felt like the foundation they needed. They began to talk about their future more openly without the weight of the past threatening to collapse their hopes. But there were still challenges. One afternoon, as Lillian returned from a grueling day at the hospital, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello, Doctor. A voice said on the other end. This is Dr. Langley from the Newton Institute. We've reviewed your credentials, and we're very impressed with your work. We'd like to extend an offer to you. We're looking for someone with your expertise to join our research team. Lillian felt the ground shift beneath her. The Newton Institute was one of the most prestigious medical research facilities in the country. An offer like this could propel her career in ways she hadn't imagined, but it would also mean leaving her family behind. She sat down on the couch, her mind racing. Aiden walked into the room, seeing her pale face. What's wrong? I got an offer, Lillian said, her voice trembling. It's from the Newton Institute. They want me to join their research team. It's everything I've worked for, Aiden, but I don't know what it means for us. Aiden knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. What does it mean for you, Lil? He asked quietly. Lillian looked at him, her heart torn. It means I get to do the work I've always dreamed of, but it also means leaving Caleb, leaving you. I don't want to make that choice. Aiden's eyes softened and he squeezed her hands. Then don't make it yet. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. Lillian felt a rush of gratitude toward him. She didn't have to carry this alone anymore. For the first time in months, Lillian allowed herself to sit with the uncertainty. She didn't have to have all the answers right away. They had time. Later that evening, as they tucked Caleb into bed, he turned to them with a big yawn. "Mom." "Dad," he said sleepily, "can we have a house like the one in the story, with a big yard and lots of trees?" Lillian looked at Aiden, her heart full. "We'll make it happen, buddy," Aiden said softly, and in that moment Lillian knew that no matter where their paths took them, they would always have each other, and that was enough.